get started, I think. Julian, do we want to take a formal roll call, or are you okay with everybody that you're aware of everybody who is on the call?
I'm going to run down the list of who I have on the call.
Before I call.
And then before you call the meeting to order, then if I miss anybody, they can speak up. Then what we did with the West Haven meeting last week was we put everybody on mute, and then when someone wanted to speak, there's a way to unmute yourself, and that seemed to work pretty well. So I muted everybody for the minute. I'm going to run through who all I've made note of as being on the call right now, and then to unmute yourself, and I think this was in the email we sent out also, you press *6, and so if I miss you, hit *6, and just announce that I missed you, and then we'll take it from there. So far I have on the line Kim Kennison, Christine Shaw, Tom Hamilton, Stephen Felsigno, Bob White, Matt Brockman, Sal Luciano, Mark Waxenberg, from Hartford, we have Yelita Lazauskas and Leon Rawls, and I believe someone, Aisha Clark. I'm not sure if that person's from Hartford or elsewhere, but I'll unmute everybody, or you can unmute yourself in a moment if I got that wrong. From West Haven, waiting on the line, Mayor Rossi and Frank Japlinski, and from the West Haven Board of Ed, Matt Cavallero. From Sprague, Cheryl Blanchard and Bill Hall and Michelle D'Amico. And then from OPM, aside from Kim Kennison, Bill Plummer and myself. So if you need to, if I missed someone, hit *6 to unmute yourself and just let me know.
This is Clarence Sacker from Hartford Public Schools.
Hi, this is Aisha Clark. I'm from Compass Youth Collaborative in the city of Hartford.
Compass, okay, thank you. And thank you, Zach.
And this is Luke Bronin. I'm on as well.
Good morning, everybody. Very good. All right, thank you. So, Kim, I guess we can start.
Julian, can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay, thank you. All right. I would like to call the MARB Review Board of April the 9th meeting to order. And at the time is 10:06. And this meeting is being recorded. I want everyone to know that. Today, I'm Kimberly Kennison. I'm the designee for the secretary, for Secretary Melissa McCall from OPM. And with me is co-chair Christine Shaw, designee for Treasurer Wooden. We do have a quorum in this meeting. And again, if anybody is going to speak, please speak, ask, and get recognized. And definitely *6 to unmute yourself.
I'm going to start recording now. I hadn't yet, so you'll get the announcement.
This meeting is being recorded and or transcribed.
Thank you, Julian. I have no other comments at this time, just that I would like to keep the meeting on time, and I will be doing time checks throughout just to make sure that because we have a really heavy agenda today. Christine, do you have any other comments or opening remarks that you would like to make this morning?
Thank you, Kim. No comments at this time.
Thank you. So agenda item number 2 is the public comment, and I do not know if we have anybody who wishes to make a public comment. If they do, I would like to have you state your name and the city that you live in, and I would like to remind everybody on the phone that this is not a question and answer period. It's only for public comment and for us to listen. Do we have any public comment? One last chance. If you do have a public comment, please hit *6 to unmute yourself and state your name. Okay, we will move on to agenda item number 3. And I am asking for a motion to approve the minutes. And when making a motion, can you please just make sure you mention your name, because there's a lot of people on the phone and I won't know who you are. I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of February the 13th.
So moved. This is Christine Shaw.
Thank you, Christine.
And Tom Hamilton will second.
Thank you, Tom. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? Okay, the minutes have been approved. Next agenda item is number 4, and it's the City of Hartford. And I will ask the mayor if he would like to comment first. If not, he may then turn it over to his staff as he wishes.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, great. So I will give some general comments up front, and then I will turn it over to you. You have the City of Hartford's financial report as of February period 8. I want to note a couple of things. One, that there are not a lot of significant differences here on the either the revenue or expenditure side. There are some, but they're relatively minimal. On the revenue side, we have backed out about $800,000 of what was anticipated revenue from parking because of the obvious drop in fourth quarter parking revenues. But I want to highlight that this report really does not yet factor in projections of the full effect of the coronavirus shutdown. So I am anticipating that our revenue line will deteriorate, and we are not yet confident, of our projections and where we'll end up. If we had to, if pushed us to make a guess, we would probably say that this revenue line is likely to deteriorate another $3 million or so because of the coronavirus impact in this fiscal year. The next fiscal year is a whole different conversation. That said, we also think that we are being conservative right now on our expenditure projections, and we think that there may be some expenditure lines that, notwithstanding additional expenditures in this period, actually end up a little bit more favorable. So far, we still believe that we will finish this year on plan, on budget, and potentially with a modest surplus, but obviously there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty right now, and I'm happy to talk about any of that or any of our thought process in detail So why don't I turn it over to you, Linda, to go through the slightly more detailed summary. Yulita, I think you have to press *6 to unmute.
Good morning, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. So as Maria mentioned, our revenues comparing to through February compared to the last year are favorable by $4 million and primarily on general tax revenues. Through February, a total of 95% of general property tax FY 2020 budget has been collected. And the general property tax collections are tracking favorable by 1.43% compared to the last year, primarily on the current year tax levy and interest collections. Due to COVID-19, the public health crisis, as Mayor mentioned, the Harbor Parking Authority projection has been adjusted by $801,000 on the other financial sources. In February, the expenditures are lower and favorable by $1 million. The main drivers are payroll, benefits, utilities, and non-personal categories. Favorable in payroll is by $897,000. That's actually of our savings and vacancies. Benefits are favorable by $13,000. It's just driven by Social Security expenses. Utilities are favorable by $67,000 due to lower expenditures in pipe and heat and AC due to just moderate winter. And non-personal favorable by $77,000. It's just due to lower costs on city facility renewal and election expense. Our unfavorable variance of $801,000 in revenues offset by favorability of $1 million in expenditures. The net favorability of $254,000 is being reported on the financial report as additional net surplus, which is totaled to $2.86 million. That is complete my report. Any questions?
This is Bob White. I'd like to take the mayor up on his offer to give a short overview to what you're thinking about in terms of the effect of the virus on the budget going forward. I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot about this going forward, but I just like to, I know you've been thinking about it a lot, I'd just like to hear your initial thoughts.
Sure, Bob. I mean, I have been thinking about it a lot, but the honest answer is I have absolutely no idea. Just coming back to this fiscal year, the way we have been looking at this fiscal year is just looking at the weekly tax payments that we're seeing come in. Obviously, we have the advantage of the fact that this public health crisis didn't hit until the final quarter, and the vast majority of our locally generated revenue has already been paid in the form of property tax. We still have payments that come in, but most of it is paid by the time we get to our fourth quarter. How this virus will affect our first quarter payments, and that is both, how it will affect taxpayers' ability to pay and also how it will affect their willingness to pay, given that we will, I believe, the council will likely adopt the tax deferment option that the state has put forward as one of the tax relief options. I just don't know. I think that we will probably have a significant number of taxpayers, both residential and commercial, who will defer taxes, and I suspect that we will have a significant number of businesses that struggle to recover at all from this. Now, the largest piece of our grand list is our downtown commercial. That accounts, I believe, for roughly 40% of our grand list, and I, again, believe that will be largely stable. but there's just tremendous unknowns in how this will affect our taxpayers' ability or willingness to pay in the coming fiscal year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one question for Jaleesa or yourself, Mayor, regarding the additional savings on the payroll line. Was this anticipated, or did something new occur to trigger the additional savings of $900,000?
I think that's. So go ahead, Elisa.
Go ahead, Mayor. You know the answer.
Well, it's just additional attrition, and some of that is planned in the sense that, where there are positions that we feel like we can hold off, we have. But I think the bigger answer is, hiring is often a challenge, and it's obviously even more of a challenge now. So I think that some of those vacancies that we might otherwise have been pushing to fill right now, we might give a little extra time, and some of it is just that we had not found people for all the positions we want to fill.
That is correct. Yes, we have few vacancies. In month one, we have 103 vacancies. So that's part of the attrition that we absorb every month.
Thank you.
This is Tom Hamilton. I have another question, I guess, for the mayor. I believe that the governor has authorized municipalities to extend their budget approval deadlines. And has Hartford discussed that, or do you have any thoughts on whether that's something you're, intend to take advantage of? And I don't know if our board has discussed how that affects the action of our board as well.
So at present, I don't intend to change any timelines to the extent that I control them. We have a relatively late budget adoption process anyway. Many towns adopt their budgets in February or March. I submit my budget later this month, and then it is reviewed and ultimately approved by the end of May. I'm not all that eager to extend beyond the end of May. So I'm hoping that we'll stick to the schedule that we normally hit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? This is for the questions for Mayor Bronin. It seems a bit surreal, but several meetings ago, there was some discussion about disaster planning for the city and the necessity to kind of get ahead of that. And I imagine that over the course of the last 3 weeks, you've had to very quickly develop in real time contingency plans for how to deal with how services are provided. Could you comment a little bit about that? And it really dovetails off of Bob White's question. If you could provide some insights into not just the financial impacts, but the operational impacts of this COVID on how the city is positioning itself over the next days and weeks ahead.
Sure. There's a lot of different ways I can answer that question, but as I think we have dramatically scaled back all in-person city services. So to the extent that we can still provide services like plan review or non-emergency inspections for small-scale construction projects, or tax collection or clerk's office or ROV remotely, we're doing those things remotely. There are many municipalities, still functions that we're performing, emergency inspections, either on the building side or the housing code enforcement. We are doing that, and then of course our public safety functions remain as effectively as normal. Obviously, the responsibilities and duties change, but in terms of the number of employees reporting to work and the fundamental core of their mission, that all stays the same. If you think about the fact that roughly 2/3 of our workforce is made up of police, fire, and DPW, good. The overwhelming share of our workforce is continuing to do their jobs, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that they're supplied with adequate protective equipment and that they're doing their jobs with new protocols and processes in place to protect them and protect the public. But I think the biggest change is just the dramatic scale down in in-person services. We have a lot of people working from home, and one of the things that we have that we worked quickly to do was to make sure everybody had the capability, the remote work capability, and our IT team worked very quickly and effectively to do that. The other thing that we've done is where departments are not consumed with the day-to-day of coronavirus response, we've been trying to take this as take this opportunity to tackle some longer-term projects that we have long wanted to tackle, whether that's just basic process improvement or trying to move some additional services online, or catch up on some filing and other things where we have folks who may be in the office but not interacting with public or other employees. So we're looking creatively for every way we can use this time to make progress on areas that we don't often get the chance to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I should move on to the next agenda item, and then for the city of Hartford, which is the non-labor contract. We have two of them today. Both of them are not for approval, they're for discussion only, and if the person that's going to discuss and brief us on the Compass Youth Violation Prevention Program, please.
Yes, good morning. My name is Kim Oliver. I am the Director of the Department of Safety, Children's Youth and Recreation, and I will present this contract to you this morning. Also, I believe on the line, in case there's questions, is Aisha Clark, Vice President of Operations of Compass Youth Collaborative. There are two slides in the packet to this contract. Just as a very brief overview, this contract is part of the city's Youth Justice Initiative, and our goal of the Youth Justice Initiative is keeping our young people on track with a focus of preventing and mitigating violence and engaging our young people who are at risk or impacted by violence in the justice system to engage them and also promote healthy behavior. We focus primarily on prevention, intervention, second chance, and also truancy. And with that, in 2017, as part of FY18, we underwent a RFP process, open competitive process, in which Compass Youth Collaborative applied, and they were the highest scoring application by far, by more than 10 points. And the focus of their program is a youth violence mitigation and re-engagement program. The award is a 3-year award with an annual contract. So this is the 3rd year of that award. So, and meaning it will go through this year, 2020. The goals of the program are on this first slide here in terms of reducing incidents of violence, also linking our people, especially those who are at risk, to resources and support. And then also, very importantly, us doing systemic work around changing the way that our young people, community, and all of us actually not just perceive violence, but what is our response and how can we better collaborate and coordinate efforts. So moving on to the second slide, I have a list of outcomes. I acknowledge this slide says FY20 results. It's actually FY19 results. I apologize for that. But what we wanted to do was really be able to illustrate the outcomes based on 3 outcomes and just give some of the numbers behind them. So as I mentioned before, one of them is reducing incidents of violence. And as you can see, there were 47 mediations completed. Compass staff regularly patrol our neighborhoods. They collaborate with Hartford Police Department as well as our schools in a very comprehensive way. again, if you have questions about any of this, I can answer any specific questions. I'll just quickly go through this. Outcome number 2, in terms of working specifically with young people, we asked them to specifically work with 80 young people. As you can see on the slide, they actually worked with 113 young people. So Compass has consistently exceeded this target. And then we go into the actual work that they're doing with those young people, which includes the 225 school visits, the 447 home visits, the 35 court visits, which means supporting young people who may be engaged in the court system, et cetera. Additionally, one of the things that Compass provides is a lot of work in terms of social and life skills. So as you can see, 169 young people, so beyond even the ones directly enrolled, and many times this may be the peers of those young people, actually attended that. In addition, what we try to do is make sure that young people have exposure to other things in their community and have opportunities for learning. So you see the 96 field trips as well as the 137 community events and other activities. And then finally, our third outcome, which is more of a systemic outcome in changing the way that we approach this work, you can see the multiple partnerships that Compass Youth Collaborative has, including with organizations such as Catholic Charities and Hartford Communities That Care, Hartford Public Schools, having very intentional, and that's very intentional, use of the word intentional there, partnerships with community organizations, and working around data and building capacity. One of the things that's not written here is our newer work around rapid response, around our youth violence intervention work over this past year. Compass, in particular, their Peace Builders have been a critical player in that work, where we've been able to respond to youth violence for young people who may be victims of shootings or stabbings, and that quickly bring together a core group of individuals, which includes Compass, as well as the Hartford school system and others. And then what we do is bring it out to a broader group, a tier 2 group of 30-plus organizations, and they played a key role in not just doing the work on the ground, but actually being part of the design team around this work. And I just want to acknowledge that it was not noted here. So this contract for this year will be the third and final year of the award. It's for $300,000, and that's what I presented to all of you today. Is there any questions?
I have a question. This stating that this is for fiscal year 20, is this contract 19 through 20 is what you're asking us to look for, or are you looking for an extension from July 1, 20 to 21?
It is actually, thank you for the question, it is actually for the year that we're currently in right now. So Compass is already doing some work. This contract allows us to catch up and continue through June 30. We have to do another open RFP process as we move forward to FY21 and beyond.
So I see that they're due to get a payment in the month of March. At least that's what the contract had stated, and I'm assuming you're all under contract. You're just bringing this forth to the MARB at this time. I would have thought that I would have saw this a long time ago.
And yes, and I agree with that, and I apologize for that. We did have some shifting in our staffing, and this did lag behind, and so I take accountability for that. But moving forward, our goal is to get this to the MARB as soon as possible.
Okay. One other question is, are you, the program that you have, do you have outcomes that are based, I see that you're providing some educational side of it, and I'm just wondering if the outcomes that you have, does this have any impact on the children that you are serving, their graduation rate, their retention rate, as you're trying to keep them in school for the public school system?
So my answer to that would be yes, and my mentioned Vice President of Operations is on, Aisha Clark. I don't know if she wants to also respond to this. What I will acknowledge is in terms of us having the data to be able to measure that impact, we do not have that data as of this moment. One of the things that the team does do, though, is engage the young person, including working with their school, so working around chronic absenteeism, trying to ensure our young people graduate. We do have some of our young people who are at New Visions, which is the school for our young people who have been expelled, unfortunately, from Hartford Public Schools, as well as Impact, similar school at Crack. So they are actually working with the young people and have those types of goals, educational goals that they build with the young people. But I believe Aisha is on. I don't know if she wants to add to this response. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. I don't know if you get the
Aisha wanted to press star 6.
Thank you. Hi, yes. So some of our long-term program outcomes are to be engaged in school, to have healthy relationships outside of Compass, and living violence-free. So a lot of the data that we look at is if our young people are reoccurring within the juvenile justice department, and also if they are decreasing in their violent behavior within the school. And also we look at how many of our young people are engaged in employment. So we do our best to make sure that we are empowering our young people to go back to school, because most of them, as Tim Oliver has stated, have been disengaged from school. So our philosophy is getting them engaged. We are not an academic program, therefore we are not giving them the tools to produce their grades to go up. However, what we're doing is helping with the truancy and helping with the chronic absenteeism because of the relationships that we have with the young people, that we're now engaging them to get back in school, focus in school, and then addressing some of the mental health issues that they have with our partnerships with other organizations. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you. And let's move on to the next contract for the Raptor technology. And that email was sent out to everybody yesterday with that contract.
Hi, this is Clarence Zachary from the Hartford Public Schools. I'm the district's Chief Operating and Financial Officer. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Clarence.
So Raptor technology is part of our efforts to increase the safety and security of our students and staff. It's a visitor management system. The way it works is an individual will come into the main office of the school, whether it be a parent, a volunteer, whatever. They would provide a state issue ID, a driver's license, and it gets scanned, and it does an instantaneous sex offender background check, and also does we keep, as you're aware, we have sometimes custody disputes about children. It keeps an active database of if there's any custody rules regarding children. That way, we can ensure the safety of both our children and our staff. This is a contract we're proposing for next fiscal year. The current cost is for implementation and setup. The ongoing cost is about $110,000 per year. Works to be less than $3,500 per school. We've got 47 school sites, so for the safety of our children, we feel very comfortable with this platform. It's the leading platform in the K-12 sector across the nation. There are numerous districts already in the state that are using Raptor. We think it'd be a very powerful added level to our security measures that we have to use within the district. I don't know if it's pretty straightforward in that the visitor manager aspect. We also, in case of any type of emergency, also has some emergency management features, which we find very attractive. Hopefully we'll never need them, but they're there in case we do.
So Clarence, I'm very familiar with this Raptor. I believe it's the same product with YMCA use. We used this product when I worked in Springfield, Mass. That's the Y, and it did come pretty robust. But you are offering, this program is offering more programs than we probably utilized, or maybe it's just very much more enhanced than what we had. After the one-time costs, they're going to have ongoing costs, and I'm wondering if this is new or if this was already planned in the budget for the city.
This is new. It's being built into our budget for the board for the public schools for next fiscal year. And we're going to fund it through some reallocation of resources. We have some, since I'm in charge of operation and finance, we have some efficiencies we're squeezing out. We're going to use those dollars to reallocate towards funding this safety project.
Very good. I do think it's important to have such a safety project.
We concur.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Clarence. We appreciate it and good luck with this contract.
Thank you very much.
All right. I think that concludes our discussion with the City of Hartford. I have it scheduled that our next subcommittee is scheduled for April the 30th with Hartford. Thank you, Mayor and Jolita and the rest of your staff that are with you today.
Thanks very much. Take care.
And be safe and be healthy.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the town of Sprague to be prepared to answer the next line item on the agenda. Julian, could you please start with a update from the subcommittee? As those materials were included in the packet, but I think it would be helpful for Julian to give an overview.
All right, there was a brief update in the packet. We, as a subcommittee, met last week. One of the big takeaways from the meeting was we learned that some of the free conference call platforms are not as robust as what we're using today, and had significant technical challenges with the system crashing on us. But we did muddle through that meeting, and we received a presentation from the town's audit firm on the results of the fiscal year 19 audit. The financial highlights and the recommendations from the auditor will be covered in another agenda item in this meeting, so I won't go through those. We also got an overview of the superintendent's proposed budget for FY21, and that budget is requesting a roughly 3.5% increase over the current year. There's some staffing adjustments, some adding to positions. One position that's made full-time, a couple of other additions, some office support, things of that nature. And we're seeing changes in projected tuition costs as a result of enrollment projections. And then the last sort of highlight from that is the projected end-of-year fund balance that at the time, Board of Ed was projecting a balance at the end of this fiscal year of about $170,000. That, of course, is subject to change as they get their arms around the impact of rapidly switching over to remote and distance learning. And those were the only two items we covered at subcommittee.
Thank you, Joanne. Okay, I'm going to give a little bit of an update on the review of the FY 2019 audit, and Christine, if you have any other items that you want to add during the time as you were present with me, please feel free to do so. But I'll give some quick highlights that the auditor had presented to us and make the board aware. The auditor presented the audit financials and stated that they were fairly reported, which means that they have an unmodified opinion. That opinion is noted on page 2 of the financial statements. The statements actually show that the general fund operating surplus came in approximately $265,000 as a surplus, and this then resulted in a year-end fund balance of a deficit of $819,000. When we compared it to the prior year of 18, it has $1 million shortfall is what they had in 18. So the $265,000 surplus then reduced the actual deficit at the end of 19. There are a few things to note when looking at the statements, and if you wanted to refer to the statement, I am looking at page, bear with me. Just lost my place. Here we go. So the statement located on page 16 of the financials, that's an accrual base, that's a full accrual base accounting statement. That is similar to a traditional business, and so the town in this particular statement is what it's making you aware of is that under a full accrual, the equity for the town is all locked up in capital assets with $25 million residing in capital assets. So at the end of the day, when their fund balance, in the position of fund balance, when you look at the assets less the liabilities, it leaves only about $1.2 million within cash and receivables. So that lets you know that there isn't anything for liquidity, there isn't a rainy day fund. They're really still trying to dig their way out of the hole that they're still in, and working hard to do so, but it's good to see that they've made progress. One of the things to bring to note to your attention on page 18 of the financial statements of the balance sheet, you're going to see that this is a governmental one, that under the capital non-reoccurring funds, there is a negative unassigned fund balance of $640,000, and this particular unfunded capital is for projects that have occurred over time that have not actually been funded. So this is something that we need to keep a watch on, and as well as possibly in the future, after we get to a positive fund balance, look to reduce this unless there is some means of additional funding coming in. One other point to make is that their positive fund balance this year, in order to get to that, it really came in as the $250,000 one-time bit of revenue that they sold for scrap metal is really what created the positive fund balance. Otherwise, the end of the year would have ended with a change that would have probably been a break even, similar to what they were planning. When you look at the 5-year plan, their end of the year is pretty much right on the mark. They were about $29,000 over in their end of the year fund balance. One of the items that I want to also bring to your attention is on page 61, the land lease. We learned from the auditors that the land lease that they received $325,000 for this in fiscal year 20 is not straight revenue to them. There has been a change in the accounting, and that item will, even though they have the cash, the lease item will be recorded on the balance sheet and will be amortized over the life of the lease, which is 98 years. amortization each year. In addition, the audit findings is what I want to move to next, and that is on, the audit results is on page 90. And they have 4 material weakness findings. Those are all repeat findings. There was one prior year finding that was closed, and they have 2 new findings. I can say that the 4 findings have been worked on, but I think that it would be helpful for the first selectman to take the time now to provide an update on the corrective action plan, unless somebody else has some questions regarding the financial statements. Or if the first selectman would like to make a comment or add to the overview that I provided regarding the financials.
Thank you. As far as the findings go, the funding, the child nutrition fund and the general ledger systems, working with the business manager from the school, those will all be taken care of beginning July 1st. Those will be correctly being reported and recorded. So those should not be a finding going forward. The policy and procedures manual is a 2-year process. We've set up a 2-year process to set that up, and so that both the town and the school district have a policy and procedures manual that would be able to be followed. So that is going to be an ongoing project. And as you've seen in the Water and Sewer Authority, that one has been corrected already, so that one will go away.
These are personal properties. Okay.
The 2 reports for the Department of Housing, that's one we need to correct, and we're planning to correct that before June 30th of this year, 2020. And the one regarding the signage for the acquisition of property for deep, the sign has been picked up and just needs to be installed at the site, and that one will be taken care of.
Any questions for the first selectman? Okay, then we can move on to the next agenda item, which is the monthly financial statement. And, that was included in your packet, and I'm going to ask the first selectman to provide an update on the financials.
On the financials, tax collections are pretty much on par from where they were last year. Expenditures are down a little bit. The ECS money we did request in, and it was approved, but we have not yet received it into the account. So we are anticipating it, but it has not arrived. And we are anticipating a positive cash flow until we hit June, and there we are predicting that we will be negative. Are there any questions on that part?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So the month of June, I noticed that you had planned that you'd have a shortfall. That shortfall was about $400,000. If you have if by your projections that it does come out that way at the end of that month, how would you plan to get through that until you get to the month of July, when the revenue comes in for the tax bills?
We would either have to hold invoices until we got to that point, or request other funds. So
Okay,
yep.
that's what I was figuring. So I just wanted to make sure. So we'll have to keep an eye on that area.
And we've been monitoring it. Melissa and I meet weekly at least, kind of reviewing the cash flow. And
the other question I have for you is, how is the Bob White's question. Bob, would you like to ask that to the first selectman, or would you like me to go? Star 6. Maybe we don't have Bob White. Anyways, could you please tell us the impact that the COVID is having on the town and how you're weathering this pandemic?
Well, at this point, almost all employees are still working, with the exception of the public library and the museum. So it's really just a few part-time employees that are laid off at this time. We do have one senior van driver that is not working by his choice because of his age. He's chosen not to work. And other than that, everyone is working. The town hall is closed, but there is sufficient work for everyone to do. I mean, we have very small departments, mostly one. So that everybody's doing that. And financially, so far, we haven't seen a huge impact. There have been a few things that we've had to do. We've had to have started to have 2 people at the transfer station on Saturdays because of the volume of people that have been coming in, and just to try to keep people, make sure they're observing the social distance, because we can't close our transfer station. We don't have curbside pickup. Other than that, at this point, hasn't had a huge impact. We do anticipate probably some impact with the deferral, because that is what we're choosing to go with, is the deferral. So that, one way or the other, we anticipate there would be a financial impact there.
And Superintendent, could you also comment?
Do you want me to update on your question, Kim?
Yes, please, on the Board of Ed side.
Sure. On the Board of Ed side, we will see some savings from this. Right now, we're paying all teachers and all staff members their salary. They're working from home. They're doing trainings, etc. Where we'll see some savings will be in our bus contract, because we have a provision in our bus contract that states that we're only paying for those days that we are providing transportation, that transportation is provided for us. We will see a few expenditures for distance learning, for computers, etc. But we're also keeping tab of that, running a sheet for FEMA, look for reimbursement.
Thank you. Somebody else was going to ask a question, I think.
Yeah, this is Bob White. Two things.
Bob.
One is, when is the next reval?
I believe it's 2022.
Okay, good. And the second is, do you anticipate any increased expenses as a result of this? And I know it's early in the process. I'm just trying to tease out what some of the issues are to watch.
At this point, I don't think we anticipate any increased expenses, although it is hard to tell.
Sure.
At this point, no. Nothing that we've come up to think of.
Okay, so it would just be delayed collections and perhaps inability to collect.
Correct.
In an unknown amount. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Kim, I have a quick question.
Yes, please, Julie.
It's, again, a similar question to what was posed to Mayor Bronin, is does the town anticipate, or what does the town anticipate in terms of its budget preparation and adoption timeline?
The town is anticipating trying to push out as far as we can on the timeline so that we can have the town input, the citizens' input. So we expect that we're going to push it out as far as we can without running over.
And as a quick follow-up, did you have a date in mind for when you would be either you or as the Board of Finance submitting or releasing a comprehensive budget that covers both the Board of Ed and all of the town operations?
No, we have not got a date yet. The Board of Finance does have a special meeting tonight to discuss some of those items.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we currently don't have a subcommittee scheduled for this month as of yet, but know that Julian and I will definitely be following up with the town.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all, and please stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you, be well.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the West Haven town, city, and Julian, I know you have included a summary in the packet. I'm just trying to move things around to this is the next part of the packet, so hold on one moment. Julian, do you want to start with the
Sure.
a brief on your update from the committee?
Yeah, very quickly, we met last week as a subcommittee. Both of the items that were covered at the subcommittee meeting are on the agenda today. So we have the results of the FY19 audit, which was completed recently, that the audit was delayed to allow for additional testing by the auditor, and we'll get into the financial results and the recommendations from the auditor in the subsequent agenda item. And then we also, it was the subcommittee's first look at the recommended FY21 budget, and that is also an item on the agenda. And the next subcommittee is meeting April 28th.
All right, thank you. So included in your packet is a presentation from the auditor, and I think that it spelled a lot of the highlights that I'm going to touch upon. In the prior calendar year, the auditor had discovered, I mentioned this at prior subcommittees as well as the MARB meeting, that the auditor had discovered prior period adjustments that needed to be made to the general fund. And these adjustments would require, at that time, was going to be approximately a $2.1 million restatement of prior year financials. We tasked the auditor with additional testing and to ensure that we were actually capturing all the prior period adjustments that were warranted, and several extensions to their deadline to submit to submit their audit was granted to provide the auditor with enough time to complete their task and provide to lessen the risk and not have another restatement. The additional testing found that more adjustments were needed adjustments and have largely would largely eliminate the city's fund balance. And so the secretary authorized $1 million of the remaining restructuring funds in order to maintain the minimal level of the fund balance. And this would put them at a point, just a 0.85% of total expenditures. As a requirement of the current fiscal year restructuring funds, the city and the board will need to provide detailed correction action plans for their findings. And I will also just give you some highlights of what the presentation was given to us from the auditor. So the general fund balance increased by $2.7 million, and that included $5 million of restructuring funds. And the auditor's presentation states that in their opinion of the financial statements, they have an unmodified opinion. On their presentation, I am looking at page 6, which will then outline the prior period adjustments that occurred. So the unassigned fund balance right now ends at $1.3 million. It was going to end at $300,000, so that was the reason for the secretary to authorize an additional $1 million to bring the fund balance up to the level that the 5-year plan had already anticipated in the original plan, which was about 1.24. It wasn't off by much. The adjustments that were unrecorded payables, and it summed up for $3.2 million in education, primarily for tuition, transportation, utilities, facility costs, and the city had an unrecorded payables of $144,000. There was a deficit fund balance in some small funds of about $50,000, and the withholding accounts had to be realigned for about $131,000, and that's the breakdown for the $3.5 million. When looking at the general fund, when you want to base it to operations, you can do that if you look at the financial statements on page 81, which is the budget to actual financials. And the net increase in the fund balance is $2.7 million. So without the prior period adjustment, the end of the year would have been a surplus for the year. When we look at I'm on page 81, the revenues to the budget number is down by $2 million, and that is a result of the $3 million of MARB funds that the board had decided that we would not extend, as their fund balance was running in with a large surplus at the time. So we did use we did provide them with $5 million. On the spending side, on a comparison for the budget to actual, they have a savings of $4 million over the budget, and that was primarily noted as savings within benefits as $1.5 million, and insurance and general government of $2.1 million. Public safety had a $500,000 savings. So that leaves that the funding from other sources has a positive variance of $744,000, and that is how the increase of $2.7 million was an increase to the fund balance. On page 8 of the presentation provides the breakout that I had just mentioned. It also does include the shortfall of education coming in the current year with $566,000 short overspending on their budget. Allentown is on page 9, and Allentown's net increase of fund balance was $1.3 million. Their ending fund balance was the 1.2 in a positive, where in the prior year they had a deficit of 118,000. So there's some progress in Allentown. And this is due to their revenues exceeding the budget by 668,000, and it was primarily within property taxes. And there was a spending savings of 674,000, and that was primarily within personnel expenses, utilities, insurance, and equipment combined of about 183,000. Moving on to page 10, the sewer fund operation, the net increase to fund balance was $1.4 million, and this increase was due to revenue in excess of their estimates of 95,000, and expenditures were less than anticipated by 1.3 million. And their debt service in the categories of debt service contingency at 450, sewer plant capital improvement of 250, equipment of 98,000, and collection systems capital improvement had a savings there of 93,000. Moving on to internal service funds, that really didn't have too much change there, but there is something that I do want to highlight, which is the change of the net position is actually, it reduced the deficit of the deficit, and now by $200,000, and now has a end of the year balance of $9.6 million shortfall. And primarily, if you look at it's on page 12 of the presentation, the change in the position, you'll see that there wasn't a lot of difference in the change of the balance. So that brings to mind that this negative fund balance of $9 million is really occurring from prior years. But it is something we need to keep an eye on, and I know that Lee Tiernan has been working, because primarily the deficit is falling within workman's comp, and I know that he has been working on some of the cases that have caused lawsuits and making settlements. Moving on to the pension plans. This area, I know, Christine, you had some comments to make. At the subcommittee, so please stop me if you do want to comment in this area. One of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention was that the change on page 13 is that the city police change in net position was down by 472,000 compared to the prior year, and that's a negative 472. And then Allentown actually has a change in net position of 843,000. While the expenses for the city increased approximately 283,000, and Allentown increased approximately 251,000. If you look on page 14, you can see that their funding for the city police is at almost 86%, and that they have funded in their pension, and Allentown has funded approximately 26.38%. And their annual rate of return, it looks like the police rate of return was much lower and dropped substantially compared to the prior year, while Allentown looked like it went up. But as we know with investments, one-year snapshots aren't usually the thing that you would want to waver on. And so if you look at page 15, when you look at the 6-year average, you'll see that the average rate of return makes a much larger swing and paints a different picture for the police being at 7.1% versus Allentown at 3.5%. On page 16, you will notice that they did a really good presentation here in trying to list out where the police and where Allentown actually fall into when compared to other towns as their percent of funding their pension plans. So while the police looks pretty good at Allentown, definitely, they've been funding it, but there is still a lot of progress to be made in that area. The next item in the presentation is on 17, which is the OPEB, and the OPEB a trust has been established, but no contributions have gone in to fund the OPEB liabilities that are stated, as the city is at 198, almost around to 199 million, and Allentown at 28 million. And but it is planned for them to in their budget for 2020. Does anybody have any questions as far as the financials are concerned before I move on to the findings? And does the city or the mayor want to add to anything about the financials? Otherwise, I will highlight the findings and then we can have discussion. Okay. I guess I'll move on to the findings, and again, there's an unmodified opinion, and on page 19 of the presentation, the Federal Single Audit Act, the auditors tested 2 programs, and within those programs, because there is a threshold of what they test when they do their testing for federal grants, and during their testing, it resulted in 3 findings, of which 2 of them have significant deficiencies, and those are new. They look like new findings, but they really did have a prior finding with the same caption of the segregation of duties in the payroll area and the reason why they had hired the HR consultant. And the main reason for that is the payroll clerk has the ability to change the rate of pay, and there's no internal controls within the payroll area. So that is for the city as well as the Board of Ed. There's also material weakness that is noted, and this is noted if you're looking for them in the Federal and Single Audit Report on page 13 is where you're going to find these findings. The material weakness is on year-end cash disbursements in the education area, and that was relative to the restatement of the financials of the prior year. And so this is definitely got a lot of attention in that area, but know that some attention needs to be and controls put in to make sure that this gets mitigated. Moving on to the State Single Audit Act audit, that consisted of 7 programs that were tested. The total amount of state funding that the city received this past year was $92 million, and as a result of their audit, concluded with significant deficiencies still again in the payroll area, the same as the federal, again in the material weakness with the cash disbursements. In addition, there was a separate report that was given that is recommendations, and the recommendations that we received them late in the game when the audit was approved, so we do not have responses yet to them, but we are working with the city and the Board of Ed to make sure that we do get those responses, as they are required to be uploaded to the state portal when the financials are uploaded. So the recommendations include 18 findings. 13 of those findings were repeats from the prior year, and five of them are new findings. They can be found as a highlight in the PowerPoint presentation from items page 22 through 24. And wait a minute, it's a little longer than that. I'm sorry. 2025. And that is it for my comments. I am wondering if either the mayor or Frank would like to make any kind of comments regarding the audit or financials.
You are no longer muted.
Hi, this is Frank.
Hi, Frank.
So, all right, so, yes, we're working on the response for that. We are working also on the detailed corrective actions as a result of this audit. Clearly, it was not what we expected as we were coming into the last quarter and the audit was being conducted. But everything on here, I think, is accurate. I think the result of the additional testing was thorough, and I'm going forward with the assumption that everything that needed to be found was found. Matt, in the Board of Education, and myself will work collaboratively to shore up any processes that they have for year end, to see if we can get them down to the same minor level of year end correction that the city had.
Frank, this is Tom Hamilton. Can you give us a little more background and understanding of what happened at the Board of Ed that they would have been so far out of bounds to have $3.6 million of bills that were misclassified? What was going on? I mean, how could that happen?
From what we could tell, Tom, this goes back years. When Matt took over in the Board of Education, the process was described to him as make sure you get 12 months of payments in your year, and so that's what they followed, that process. However, what ended up happening is that 12 months of payments weren't necessarily the 12 months that pertained to that particular fiscal year. So as time went on, the year-end accrual or the payable entries were not recorded properly. And that was discovered this year. Actually, I think they discovered it last year as well. I'll have to go back through the notes from last year's budget, last year's audit rather. But this year, because we did give them more time than normal to do their audit, they were able to track this down, and unfortunately, that's what it is. It's a process and a practice that has occurred over the past, I want to say, at least 8 years. But the amount of the outstanding bills, of course, grow every year as prices go up.
So is this utilities
No, it was
we're talking about and other things? Or?
It was primarily the tuition and transportation.
Okay.
Of the three and change, I think 2.5 or 2.8 of it related to transportation and tuition.
Okay, well, obviously it's quite a disappointment, but anyway, you are where you are. So
yeah, it was certainly a kick in the gut.
Any other questions?
This is Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mark.
No, it's Matt from the.
Hold one second.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mark.
So let me understand, when I read the audit, just for an understanding, so what was happening annually, and whether it was tuition, transportation, or other bills, is that the bills were coming in, let's say, in May, or some bills were coming in, but they weren't being paid until the following fiscal year. So because they weren't being paid in the previous year's budget, the following year's budget was being technically affected because you were paying for the previous year's bills. In other words, if you got a bill in year one, you were paying it out of the budget in year two. Is that in a simplistic way of things happening, and then it just kept on snowballing into a point where it was noticed, I don't want to say noticed, but came to the fore?
Am I on mute still, or?
No, go ahead, Matt.
Nope, you're good, Matt.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think that's an accurate way to sum it up, Mr. Wackenberg. Just some background. When I went through this, when it was brought to our attention, the board had operated this way since fiscal 13. The process was, it was reviewed by 3 different audit firms during this time frame, and the process continued because those audit firms were approving it. Now that the error has come to light, we are confident and very committed to fixing this issue. We've already put a series of actions in place. First and foremost, we've completely changed our month-end and year-end close procedures. We adopted a new systematic cutoff procedure for month-end bills. Everything that is still outstanding will be accrued by the 25th day of the following month. Our AP staff will be booking those accruals. I think a major something that major happened since the subcommittee meeting is we reached out to ACES, and within their financial services team, they're going to allocate some staff to us to go through all our procedures, to train, to help implement anything that they see necessary. Their director and their staff will kind of develop type of like a mentorship for myself and our staff. This closeout procedure, we put together the standard operating procedures. It was been sent to Kim along with all the related documents for her review and her comments. Another thing we're doing is we are centralizing the billing process. Right now, how the board's been operating is bills have been going to all the different locations. Right now, going forward, effective immediately, all bills will be sent to a new accounts payable email that will be only accessible for central office staff, and it will be our AP staff's responsibility to resolve all the billing issues and get sign-offs from managers, our billing administrators as needed. Frank talked about the increased collaboration. We're going to set up some meetings throughout the entire fiscal year, as well as year-end to review the financial statements to ensure accuracy and resolve any issues. And I think the most important part and the most important statement for the board is we're currently, for fiscal year 20, developing an action plan to turn funds back over to the fund balance. We understand how significant this was, and we're committed to assisting and getting the fund balance back to where it should be. Just as a side note, the board does have an established history of turning back funds. We've turned over $2.4 million since FY13. In the fiscal year 20 budget, at the moment, we are seeing favorability in our employee benefits line items, our workman's comp, and our heat for buildings, to name a few. And we are going through all our service contracts with what's happening with COVID-19 to find additional savings while also being sensitive to our vendors and paying all our staff.
Okay, thank you. It's just concerning only because if you still owe bills from a previous year, then the following year's budget really isn't quote-unquote accurate because you haven't paid the bills from the previous year. But I'm glad to see that you've taken the corrective action, and we'll be working with Kim and OPM to make sure that this procedure is handled properly going forward, because it is disconcerting for it to happen over the previous amount of years. But we are where we are, and hopefully it can be corrected for the future. Thank you.
This is Bob White. Question, I guess, for Frank. Has the city spoken to council about the role of the auditors in missing this? Don't tell me what they said, just have you reached out?
No, that we have not had that discussion.
Can I address?
Well, the mayor.
A thought,
Excuse me, I just want to address a couple of things that were said before we get off of the audit. And Nancy Rossi, City of West Haven. Number one, I was on the council for many years, so I'm very familiar who the auditors were and were not. And even though the name of the audit firm changed, there were only two partners that were involved. FY 11, 12, 13 was Joe Centofani. FY 14, 15, and 16 was Scott Bassett. And FY 17, 18, and 19 were Joe Centofani. Now, the management letters that I could find, it was mentioned in certain management letters. It obviously wasn't corrected, but it was, and I believe it was in 15 and 16. So, and again, Joe Centofani, as we know, 17, because the audit was so late coming out, there wasn't a management letter, but it was mentioned in 18. It wasn't ever, we didn't know the magnitude of how much it was going to be, but I did want to say that it was mentioned, and obviously at that point in time, not much was done about it. So it does stem back, as Matt said, and I appreciate Matt's hard work and all he's doing now to make changes and working with Frank Chaplinsky. I do agree we are where we are, and but we're going to try our best to move forward, because it was a real setback I look at for the City of West Haven. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I haven't waived the rights.
I hope I'm not getting ahead of things, but in the audit report there was information about the rate of return on the pension funds, and I'm just wondering if there's been any thought about the impact of the economic impact of the virus on the market and what that rate might be going forward. I'm sure you don't have an answer.
Well, no.
That's the notion of
Bob,
on the agenda.
Bob Lee Tiernan, City of West Haven. I think everybody's got to understand what we're going to try to do is take whatever available data is there and try to extrapolate and project. If you look at the crisis and financial decline in 08-09, that's probably the best data. But remember, is this going to be a V return? The market's already up today. It's going to be down another day. I think because of the root causes of what's causing the decline and the reason for when this will end, because it will end, this may be different than other downturns. So I don't know if we can really extrapolate from any previous decline how this could impact things. But we're trying to generate models that might impact that. Additionally, for what it's worth, we're doing an RFP to try to consolidate our investment services so that we save a little money on that side too. And I think that will allow for us to question the advisors who apply to be part of that RFP, for them to explain how they're going to deliver for us in this time. And there's different investment strategies, and they'll talk about them. Whether you get more conservative, whether I can tell you that our pension fund, he reports to the police commission at least once a month, and there have been periods where our share of gold goes up, and our share of stuff that's a little more risky goes down, and so on and so forth. We never got into any Madoff money. That was fortunate. So I don't think it's as dire as people think, but we are thinking about the proper model. There's no perfect model, but we're going to do the best we can, and I think we'll properly anticipate this. In addition, though, we're going to take guidance from when we get in our letters to suggest what our contribution amount should be. And so we're just going to follow that contribution amount until we hear differently from them.
Okay. long as you're working on it, I mean, that does sound constructive, but, you know, I think there's a number of negative things. How bad it is a matter of, you know, your professional judgment, so that's good. The other thing is, on the agenda has been, and we talked a little bit at the subcommittee, is the notion of when does the normal cost payments become too much to bear, and I don't. It doesn't seem like a huge undertaking by the actuaries or whoever, but I'm wondering if that's in the works and we might get that, you know, before the, you know, we consider the budget.
I can check with Nolan.
Yeah, Bob, again, Lee Tiernan, that, I think I heard that raised by at the subcommittee level. I don't think we started, Frank and I have started to reach out to Milliman to see how they would provide us those numbers. I don't think it's like a one, I think there'll be different models. Like you'll get like 2 or 3 models to show you different outcomes. I don't think there's one model fits all on that. You know, actuarially, it's impacted.
I understand, but I just think that you know, the city needs to look at it, make its best judgment about when it's coming. You know, especially you know, Allentown. That you know, just so you know how long you have to fix the problem. Hopefully, it's far out, but you know, it's long. You know, it's. I'm not suggesting a result. It's just that's on your radar screen, because that could be on your 5-year plan. On your plan, that could be which you know, you're looking for you know, to hit your 5% fund balance at 2023. So that's not a long way away.
Right. Yeah,
as long as it's on the agenda.
yeah, no, we're going to get that. We're going to get that data. We're going to get that data. The only reason you don't have the data now is because the first I thought maybe we should have thought about it sooner. The first I thought about it was when it was peripherally discussed at the subcommittee meeting. But then Frank and I regrouped, and we will we'll be getting that information.
Thank you.
This is Christine Shaw with a comment. There have been discussions around how to achieve some economies of scale around the management of the pension assets between the city, police, and Allentown. And I'm glad to hear that RFP hasn't been issued, if I should just clarify.
No. Like a lot of things here, we're short-staffed. We have the person who was doing our purchasing is doing 2 jobs. During this COVID, we've transferred on an emergency basis another individual who had the job prior to. So hopefully we will be able to get that out in the next few days. But no, we had a little slowdown because we had some short staffing.
Understood. I'm wondering if it would be helpful if at the subcommittee level we could have a separate set of tasks that relate to the pension issues in particular. So not only as it relates to the RFP, but, you know, I think everyone must have noticed during the presentation of the audit findings it's a fairly significant distinction between the average rate of return for police at 7.18% and 3.53% for Allentown. And so, you know, much of that has to do with how the assets are invested, what the cash flow needs are. So, you know, there's a lot underlying those figures. But I do think that, you know, to Bob White's point, we have to have a focused conversation. I've heard him ask this question for the last 4 months at least, and that's as long as I've been the designee for MARB. I think it is essential that we kind of have as focused attention as we do on the systematic resolution of the audit findings from 18 and 19. We ought to likewise have a systematic plan to address what are glaring inadequacies or inefficiencies, at least, with the way in which the pension and OPEB, I want to throw OPEB in there too, the way in which both of those tasks are managed.
Yeah, I mean, the OPEB task, I think you'll appreciate this, Ms. Shaw. For the first time in, I don't know, we couldn't find records of it. We put out a banking RFP. which is going to touch on a number of areas, and once it's completed, we'll highlight a summary. But as part of that banking RFP, it will touch on some of these issues. And in addition, it should give you some level of comfort in terms of the investment. When that banking RFP will be completed next week. The responses will be in next week. In terms of the investment strategy, to give people some level of comfort, the person who does the police investments also does investments for other municipalities and has a larger municipal portfolio than the individual who does Allingtown. That's not to say that the RFP isn't going to be full and fair and open, but I think that may have some impact, and that will be part of our quizzing of respondents to the RFP is their municipal experience.
Okay, so we can get into this more at the level, but I'd like to know what's the section between the banking RFP and the pension issue, the pension funding and the investment management. Is that consolidated? It's part of like one entity would provide both banking and investment management?
No, I think what I'm trying to say is we're looking at a lot of items on our financial services listing. What the banking RFP is going to do is it's going to provide us with an ability to, for example, individuals who get paper checks, or to the extent maybe they get paper checks through pensions, will be able to consolidate some costing on that. We might be able to reduce some costs on how we manage the pension systems through the banking RFP.
Okay. Will you continue?
But I don't have any more to add, I don't think.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is to discuss the FY21 budget. And that was already provided to everybody. It's in their packet, and Julian also provided an overview. Julian, do you want to give any highlight, or do you want me to? I was planning to turn it over to the city to provide us with an update.
No, by all means, I think we'll let the city take the lead, and then if there are any questions that any of us can help answer, we will.
Thank you. Mayor or Frank?
I will start, and then Frank will jump in afterwards. I just have just a few comments. Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to give an update on the West Haven budget process. As we all know, this year's process is very different and unlike any we have experienced. In compliance with our city charter, I delivered my recommended budget to the City Council virtually on March the 19th. We also held a remote public hearing allowing the public to email comments and testimony, which went well and without incident. My fiscal year recommended $165.2 million budget safeguards essential services and continues the reorganization of our city government. The budget realizes efficiencies which include modernizing our payroll and benefits process and the moving of our city employees to the state health plan, which will achieve significant savings. As we now deal with the coronavirus COVID-19 crisis in West Haven, our residents are experiencing many hardships, including financial ones. With this said, the City of West Haven will continue to look for additional revenue sources and efficiencies to lower the small mill rate increase proposed. Since the budget was released, the city has already identified that our real estate conveyance fee has not been adjusted in many years and is much lower than our neighboring communities. We estimate that increasing our conveyance fee to a more competitive rate will generate about $325,000 for fiscal year 2021. I will also be working with our city council to implement additional efficiencies and look to increase non-tax revenues to reduce the burden on our taxpayers. I would appreciate your understanding and support as we move forward with these efforts. Thank you very much, and I'm going to turn it over to Frank.
Okay, so the budget that you have before you is what we prepared, what got presented to the council virtually, as the mayor had indicated. A couple things to note is that we were very cognizant of trying to maintain, and in fact we did maintain, the mill rate increase that was put forward in the 5-year plan. That mill rate was adjusted for the increase in the grand list, which grew by almost $36 million over what was expected and what was built into the plan. We do include $4 million of restructuring funding. You know, one thing that we've done differently this year, I've been told, than in the past, is we required the departments to submit to us a very detailed capital requirements going out for the next 5 years. So, for example, in Public Works, they've gone through and they have identified by equipment number, by plate number, every piece of equipment, when it needs to be replaced and why. We've done the same thing for the police departments. This allowed us to provide bond advisors with a very detailed capital requirements in order to get to a debt service number. We did keep the funding from the city side to the education department flat year over year. We do know that the ECS grant funds will increase over last year, and the education department has indicated they will use that to fund the difference between what they requested and what the city actually funded. One thing also to note is that in this budget, both police and Allentown, the pension contributions are following exactly what was recommended by the actuary. So no cost cutting there. And finally, you'll see that the healthcare line items were actually built up using various data points. One being the actual billing from the state for the premiums on the partnership plans. So we're able to use that as a base, layer in any additional new hires coming in, as well as using the rather conservative, I'll say, estimates from Lockton regarding the retiree costs. And conservative meaning that they provided us two scenarios, one being roughly a 3% increase blended rate between the city retirees and Board of Education employees that are not transferring to the partnership plan. Second, identifying those two entities separately, showing actually a decrease on the Board of Education side and a 24% increase on the city side for those retirees. We built our budget using that 24% model to make sure that we were very comfortable, and I say I was very comfortable with the numbers that were presented to the mayor and to the city council. With that, I will take any questions.
This is Bob White. Just to highlight something that came up at the meeting, or a couple of things. One is, I think the sense of the subcommittee was that we need to look at this budget in connection with the 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan calls for the 5% general fund increase in fiscal year 2023, which is the preparation of that budget is 2 years from now. And at that point, it called for a mill rate in order to get there of about 39. I don't have the numbers in front of me. In addition to the thought that with an increase in the grand list, that the commitment of the 5-year plan relates to the amount of tax revenue rather than the mill rate. I guess as you go through this, you need to figure out, or I suggest that you look at how you're going to get to that mill rate. And I absolutely do not discount what the mayor said about the burden on taxpayers, which has been complicated here. But you can't have it both ways. You can't say we don't want to do the mill rate increase and we're going to have this budget. So I strongly suggest that you not just try to have savings, but you're going to have to do it if you're not going to do the mill rate. I don't like the idea of doing this year by year. Oh, we hit our vote. And one of the key ways you make the goal in 2023 is the fact that the $4 million bond payment drops out. So I hope that you envision making significant changes to the 2021 budget, before it goes too far. And I guess the second question is, given the impact of the virus, what does your crystal ball say about the revaluation in October? I know it doesn't hit till 2022, but that's important in your 5-year plan. Any reactions?
Good questions. I have not heard from the assessor's office yet as to what this may or may not, how this may or may not impact the revaluation. That is a big concern of mine because it is a very large assumption right now within the 5-year plan. Going back and looking at where we need to be, I'm trying to finalize the model, and it looks right now, it looks like it's going to be a 1.05 mil increase over in each of the next years to still get to that 5% fund balance.
Yeah.
So it's concerning. It's absolutely concerning. But I think we have more detail now than we've had in the past. Going back and looking through, for example, the debt service, the police pension is actually going to be a $5 million impact, not a $4, when that finally drops off.
Good.
Good. And that was only, we only found that out by, getting all of the detail from our bond advisor. He provided me all of the project details as to what makes up the debt service, so I was able to actually see that particular line item and what the impact is. So to your point, yes, we need to definitely to refine assumptions within the plan. I think the impact right now is $22 or $23 million on the grand list, I think, is the revaluation impact, which is a big jump. It's 2% is what the current assumption is. So it's concerning, but we're working through it. I do have a preliminary model pulled together. Michael Milone is giving me some assistance with reviewing it to make sure that nothing jumps out as grossly inaccurate or wildly excessive. But I accept the feedback and we'll definitely move forward as we need to.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah.
This is Mark.
Go ahead, Mark.
Just briefly on the health insurance piece.
Yes, sir.
Right. The IBNR it's going to be paid, because you're moving to the partnership plan on the city side, except for the retirees. So you have an IBNR cost associated with that, is that correct?
That's correct. And we have not gotten a process yet as to how to submit those claims to the state for reimbursement. But as far as I know right now, the city is paying all of those in addition to the normal premium.
Okay, so the IBNR is going to be calculated in a way that that'll be zeroed out. And what was the IBNR? Over $1 million, wasn't it?
It was north of $1 million for the city side, yes.
Yes. And the retiree healthcare cost was a 3% versus a 24% based on what the Board of Ed did. I looked at those figures from Lockton. And by the way, we assume that Lockton has a retention fee with Anthem for maintaining the business with Anthem. That's my assumption, because that's built in to a variety of different brokers, and Lockton is considered a broker. So that being said, and I don't know if Matt's still on the line, but my understanding is the board is deciding to stay with its self-insured plan based on Lockton's presentation, which to me doesn't match their budget presentation. But that said, can there be some clarification on what's the board's intent regarding its health insurance? Because if it decides not to go to the partnership for whatever reason, it will retain an IBNR cost of, I assume theirs is over $1 million as well. And I thought that MARB was going to, part of its assistance to the city was going to be to assist the town in paying its IBNR costs for the city and for the board if it goes to the partnership plan, or assuming it does go to the partnership plan. So there's a variety of questions in there, but can I get some help and clarification on the health insurance side for board? The city is clear to me. They've gone to the partnership plan. They're erasing the IBNR. They still are maintaining their plans for their retirees per their legal obligations, and their premiums are going to increase whatever they're going to increase, and you put in 24%. But on the board side, it's still confusing to me as to what the board is going to do.
Matt, are you still on?
This is Matt for the board. To answer your question, Mr. Wexenberg, right now we are moving forward like we're staying in our self-insured, but the state partnership plan is not off the table. We have contracted Siegel to provide some information as well, do a study to compare it to what we've gotten from Lockton. I believe we've just recently received that study, so we will be making a decision in the next days or weeks or so.
Okay, the only reason I say that, Matt, is based on the information that Julian provided and some quick analysis that I've done on your insurance costs over the years, there have been surpluses ranging from $375 to over $1 million in that account, well over 3%, some up to 6%, which is good news. But I've never seen such a wide disparity, even on the self-insured plan, which I've been involved in for boards of ed for, I've seen 1%, 2% swings either way. But such large percentages of surpluses consistently. And this year, as a matter of fact, I think your own numbers show roughly a 5% surplus in your health insurance account, over close to $700,000. So something, whether the claims versus the anticipated claims versus the premiums, what I'm seeing is a constant miscalculation, if you will, where everybody's getting healthy all of a sudden. And here you have an increase of 2.1% built in when you have a $700,000 surplus for this year. Now, obviously, Lockton's giving you a figure, so therefore you're going to put in their figure. But I guess what I'm asking is clarity in the future, or hopefully at the next meeting, on the health insurance on the board side, and what's intended for regarding the board's IBNR costs, should it stay with its self-insured plan, and for MARB, what is its intentions, and this is for a discussion later on, regarding compensating, if you will, or the town. If it doesn't go to the partnership plan, it's $1 million of money that I thought we had committed to the town for the purpose of IBNR that no longer exists. So those are just ideas and questions for the future. I know we're running late, so I just wanted to bring those up.
Excuse me.
I will get that information for you. And yes, current year we are running extremely well. And when we back into our operating budget after the mayor and the council go through it and give us a number, we will take into the increase into consideration. If we're still running over $700,000 to the good, we will not be increasing it to the level that Lockton has told us to.
Thank you.
This is Christine with a question for Frank. If I heard you correctly, Frank, you indicated that the proposed budget assumes $4 million of restructuring funds. Just to clarify, that the recent allocation of $1 million to address the audit findings and negative fund balance, didn't that count against the initial 8 that the city received? In other words, is there $4 million left to allocate to this budget?
Yes, those were 2 separate fiscal years. So of the original 8 that was supposed to come to the city for fiscal 19, 5 was actually sent over. 4 million.
Including,
I'm sorry?
including the discretionary $1 million?
That's correct. It was 4,
Okay.
4 plus the discretionary 1 million.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions? We're at 11:59, so we still have one other agenda item, which was an update on the monthly.
I have one quick question.
Yes, Joe.
At the beginning of this agenda item, the mayor outlined a couple of areas in the budget that it sounded to me like were being, that there were changes suggested to those items, such as the real estate conveyance fee. Should the subcommittee or the MARB in general be expecting a revised proposed budget at this point, or what exactly? I wasn't sure that I should be reading more into those comments or not.
Okay, Nancy Rossi here. The way it works as far as our charter is once I hand the budget over to the council, it's up to the council. So it would take 9 votes of council to add any, change any revenue or expenditure line item. What I am going to do is get everything together and present it to the council, but it is going to be up to them. And my understanding is too, and Attorney Tiernan had told me about this, that with a conveyance fee increase, we need OPM to sign off on it, correct? Or have some involvement in it? So I'm going to let Lee take over, but that is the intent, Julian.
Yeah, Julian, and you probably know this better than I do. So if you look at the other communities that are in the same bucket that we're looking to go in terms of the conveyance fee, we have opportunity zones, but lo and behold, we have no enterprise zones. So I have to get an enterprise zone either approved for the whole community or at least part of West Haven in order to take advantage of the conveyance fee increase. So we have a couple of steps. It may take a little longer. I don't know if I can complete it before the budget process, but that would be the goal. And obviously, the city council will certainly want to know if there is additional revenue that's going to be garnered through that process.
This is Bob White. Just a quick observation that I think can be dealt with, offline. Is I'm a little concerned that the MARB not be confronted with a fait accompli. That is, that the budget is already done, is presented to the council. We don't have the 5-year plan, and that's not a criticism of anybody, but we don't have that. And I would expect that there's going to be recommendations for significant changes to the budget. So I don't know how that plays out. I don't think we need to resolve it here, but I would just ask, OPM to work with the city on that timetable, because otherwise I can see some miscommunications and ruffled feathers that, it would be good to avoid.
If it gives you any confidence, Lee Turner, if it gives you any confidence, Mr. White, I think OPM will tell you that we burden them almost on a daily basis and keep them informed as to what's going on and how we should proceed, and we definitely try to leverage their guidance.
Okay, just don't want you to have any additional issues with the council. Anyway, go ahead. I'll leave it to you guys.
All right. I do agree with you, Bob, and Julian, and so Mayor, if you are looking to be making some changes, it would be important that you fold us in, because right now that we're looking at the budget that's already been presented. Does anybody want to take a few extra minutes to go over the monthlies to get a high-level update?
I can give you just a quick 50,000-foot view. Right now, revenues are remaining constant. One thing you'll see in my narrative is that we are projecting the revenues to be where they need to be. However, that includes a sale of the liens that are scheduled for the fourth quarter. Now, I don't know how COVID will impact that at all, but historically that has been a $1 million to $1.4 million range regarding those liens. So I will keep you informed on that. On the expense side, things are looking really well. And for the city, we are projecting a surplus for the year of approximately approximately $600,000. Half of that coming from the Board of Education, given projections provided by Matt. On the sewer fund, we are projecting a $900,000 surplus there, coming mostly from cost savings as opposed to increased revenues. So good news for the sewer department. And Allingtown is currently coming in at roughly a $250,000 surplus. That is primarily driven by $160,000 of revenues obtained for us by Mike DeMassa that were not in the budget. As you may recall, last year's budget deliberations, those numbers had not been finalized yet, so they were not included in the budget, as opposed to this year's budget, which has $900,000 into it, but is committing that $900,000, the bulk of it, to go against the unfunded pension liability.
That's good news.
And that's all I have.
Any questions? Okay. Okay, our next subcommittee. It was scheduled for April 28th, but Mayor, I believe that you needed to move that date. Am I accurate on that?
Well, that was before COVID, and then my conference got canceled, so that's why, when Julian said April 28th, I didn't gasp, because I'm planning on being here on April the 28th, and not in San Francisco, like I was supposed to be for a conference.
So we could move forward with the original date.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other business discussion?
Sal Luciano, motion to adjourn.
Mark Waxenberg, second.
Thank you. All in favor? You've been muted. Thank you, everybody. Stay healthy.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.